Friends, as we prepare for the welcoming in of the beloved festival that has been affirmed and celebrated by our people for 3,000 years in a continuous chain of tradition and memory, we know that for us as Jews, Passover and the Exodus story of our liberation from bondage and enslavement, that this is the core story, the foundational narrative of our entire history and of our entire spiritual vision as a faith and as a people. Every religious tradition has its foundational story. For Christianity, it is, of course, the resurrection of Jesus. For Islam, it is the story of the Prophet Muhammad's night journey from Mecca to Jerusalem, when he was revealed, or it was revealed to him according to Islamic tradition, the truths that he would then teach through the Holy Quran. In the Buddhist tradition, it is the famous story of the Buddha receiving enlightenment as he sat under the Bodhi tree. For us as Jews, it's so characteristic that the foundational story is not one that happened to an individual, because for us there is no one founder of Judaism. It is the collective memory of the community that for us is foundational. So it's not an event in the life of Moses or any other one person. It's a memory of all of us as a community that is our foundational story. And that story is one that became the ethical and moral mandate of all that preceded it. The memory that we were outsiders, despised refugees and strangers, that we were slaves, and that in our liberation from slavery, we went on a spiritual journey that challenged us to bring that message of liberation and freedom to all humanity. To remember that our experience is the essence of Torah. Torah is not only a written text. Torah is human experience. The divine is revealed within the experience of individuals and in communities. And for us as Jews, that thundering, compelling mandate was, you have been there. You have known the worst of humanity's capacity for cruelty, and therefore you must care for the stranger, for the outsider, for the refugee. You must work together to end every form of slavery and oppression that shackle the bodies and the minds and the spirits of every human being. That is why at Passover, from the beginning to the end of the service, the thrust and the focus is retelling, reliving, and reaffirming that ancient story. The story that takes our experience and sets it forward as a model for all humanity. And it is so important to remember how that Exodus story was embraced by all of humanity as a model of freedom and liberation. Throughout history, so many other peoples, so many other national and religious groups have looked to the Hebrew Exodus story as the model for their own hopes and aspirations for freedom. Whether it was the African American slaves here in America who remembered that biblical story and who sang about it and who prayed about it and who saw it as a model for what their own hopes and dreams were, whether it was the oppressed peoples of Latin America during the 60s and 70s, whose theology embraced the idea of the Exodus as a political reality for all time. It is this ancient story that has been reaffirmed and relived throughout the ages. And this year, as we know, the story takes on such immediacy, such relevance. As we listen to the story this coming week at our Seder, we will be hearing the echoes of challenges that are being played out in the headlines of our world in the 21st century. And that is why the annual remembrance, celebration, and full observance of Pesach becomes not just a ritual, not just a tradition, but an active and compelling inspiration to energize us and challenge us to be out there working for liberation. There's one aspect of Passover that I don't usually talk about, but it's one that I think does offer us compelling messages and ways of experiencing and expressing these values. As Reformed Jews, we are far more concerned with the broader message than with the details of ritual tradition. And so none of us are going to be this weekend cleaning out our kitchens and changing our dishes and going around with a candle and feather to get the chametz, the crumbs of leaven, Monday morning on Sunday night or Monday morning. But as Reformed Jews, there is a compelling symbolism of sustaining from bread or abstaining from bread and not eating bread but eating matzah during the week of Passover. Because this reminds us every day throughout the day, not just on the Seder night, but throughout the week, at those moments when we have to think about our own sustenance, when we have to be with our coworkers and make a statement. It reminds us that this message should never be far from our consciousness, and that the eating of matzah, this bread of affliction, this ancient bread that our ancestors baked and ate in their hurried escape from slavery on that fateful night of the first Passover, that remains for us something we can literally taste. That sensual quality of the Passover, where the taste of matzah, the taste of the bitter herbs, of the mixing of the sweetness of the charoset, the apples and cinnamon and honey and wine with the bitter herbs, the parsley, every one of the foods on the Seder plate are meant to employ our senses to experience anew the timeless message. So I would encourage you to try this year, if you don't already make it your own discipline, to not eat bread and to take the opportunity throughout the day to mindfully engage with that ancient symbol that has such deep historic resonance. And as you eat it, and it's dry and it's crumbly, and by the end of the week you feel it very much here, there's a small price to pay for the message that it represents and for the way that it binds us together, literally and spiritually, with the generations who, through this symbol, relived the Passover story. And so when we gather, particularly here at our Temple Seder on Tuesday night, we will begin with that very compelling prayer in our Reform Haggadah that sets the tone for everything that we will be doing this week. Now, in the presence of loved ones and friends, before us, the emblems of festive rejoicing, we gather for our sacred celebration. With the household of Israel, our elders and young ones, linking and bonding the past with the future, we heed once again the divine call to service, living our story that is told for all people, whose shining conclusion is yet to unfold.